Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Danger Mouth. I'm eating a Cadbury's cream egg, which is very naughty, but it is Easter.
Don't do that.
So I'm very happy to welcome a guest today, who is Costas P. I shan't attempt to pronounce his second name because it's just got far too many syllables.
That's shocking.
I can only do 2 syllables, and then it just all gets a bit funny. So he'll explain later. But he's just been on holiday. So what have you been up to?
I've been to Slovakia for with a friend of mine, a friend called Bernard, and this is the third time we've done a road trip around this time of year in March, which is great because it's not the tourist season. And we've gone to the north of France before. We've gone to the former Yugoslavic countries before. And this year we decided Bratislava in Slovakia as a starting point. Took a night train in, rented a car when we arrived, and with no agenda whatsoever, we toured the country for at least, let's say, the western half of the country for about 4 days. And what is interesting when you don't have a plan, which is why I like these trips so much, is you come back and you realize, well, we were so lucky that everywhere we went, there was something interesting. Even though we had no plan. And then you realize
is that because you've got a low threshold of interest?
Well, just imagine, Mike, just for the sake of it, you're driving down the motorway and you see a little sort of road going up a hill, and you decide, well, let's see what happens if we can take the car all the way up. And you end up with and at the top there's a copper mine, which has been basically, it's now no longer in operation, but which say was mined for like 400 years, originally funded by the de Medicis from Italy in the 15th century. And you realize there's interesting stuff everywhere. It's just that when you have a plan, you kind of skip it.
How did you find all that stuff out?
Well, you find a little sign, which is a little plaque, which they would have sort of bolted
onto
the
European community, I guess.
Yes. In this case, not even that. But yeah, the European community has been doing a lot of things in this country. But it's interesting. It's also an interesting country from the point of view that it kind of skipped the commercialization that Western Europe saw in the 70s and 80s and early 90s. So on the one hand, you have a very modern country and well-organized country, but it's also one without billboards and sort of commercials sort of being pushed in your face and advertising everywhere. So it
sounds like you liked it then.
I did, yes.
Yes.
And it just makes me so interested in the area because because I travel for business normally and don't make any effort to sort of look outside the hotel window. I hadn't realized Bratislava, Prague, Budapest, Krakow, they're all within driving distance of each other. It's like an hour, 2 hours away. Vienna, I mean, it's incredible. It's such an interesting place. So, sorry, that went straight in.
You've got a job with the Slovakia Tourist Board, so well done.
Yeah.
So, I've got no idea what this episode's about, but we'll get to that.
Shall I provide some kind of context, do you think?
Oh, go on then.
So normally Danger Mouth is about innovation, and we live in a world where there are very few innovators. But Costas is definitely one of them, I would say, either on his own behalf or growing companies and selling it to big companies, or helping big companies to innovate. And so it was an opportunity to tap into some of Costas, your experience, if you're happy to share some of it. And the trigger for it all was your latest book, which is Tailbag Dog.
Ah, yes.
Which, I have a copy of there.
I have one here too.
Awesome. So I thought we start with, I've always been intrigued by your Twitter handle, which is Grumpy Innovator. So it's like, is being grumpy a prerequisite for being an innovator, do you think?
Well, I guess in my case, it's a bit of an outcome rather than a prerequisite. And I guess when I came into the world of, let's say, mass market innovation, big markets, big companies, big consumer groups, I had already had 10 years before as an engineer making machinery and designing manufacturing environments. And I guess what just struck me was how disconnected from reality a lot of the innovation work was that I saw happen around me. And and you've covered many of these topics in previous podcasts, but it's like working on the wrong problem or not acknowledging you actually need a problem to solve before you start work on an innovation. And it is bizarre things. And also, I guess most of all, none of what I saw um, had any relationship to what I was reading in the business books about how innovation is supposed to work. What I saw was very different things. And usually the business books talk about the narrative and the great story that you hope to be telling around what doing new things is all about. But if you look at what businesses needed or what businesses were actually doing, there's quite a gap. So yeah, and I started I started posting on Twitter, knowing that whatever I put is official, and it's like a notebook with like 1,000 people checking your writing. And eventually I realized I could actually turn them into little books. So that's kind of how I also started sort of publishing stuff around this. And I mean, it's great because either people find it very well funny and insightful, or they just don't get it. I mean, I've never had fights or trouble or anything from it.
Right.
No matter
Yeah.
how direct I am, it's either people just say, okay, yeah, you have a point, or let's talk about more about this. But no one ever gets angry, thank God.
Yeah. So
So, so,
is it
sorry.
your view that the
Oh, go
business
on.
books are the things that are right, or they're the ones that are wrong? Because I'm one of my favorite pages in Tell My Dog is the new business landscape where political correctness means that you can't have good to great anymore. You've got to be good to
Yeah,
compliant and stuff.
yeah. Sorry, what was the question, Daryl? Is it are the books correct or are they wrong?
Yeah. Or
It's
was it? Yeah. The clients are who's right and who's wrong? The clients or the books?
Well, this is where I guess the Lindy principle comes in, which is if the book survives for long enough, then probably there is some truth to it, which is probably true for only like 5% of the books. I mean, I have, like yourself, a whole bookcase behind me, which I could probably clean out and throw away 80% because it turned out to be a fad, whatever they were talking about. And the it's probably also a little bit because business books are an industry in themselves. I mean, it's not. I mean, let's be honest, it's not that hard. It's not that difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's Yeah,
it-
we did a study about 10 years ago about how many copies do you need to sell to make money from a business book, and the answer was zero. So it literally is an industry in its own right. But yeah, selling copies is the detail at the end.
yeah,
Um, it's part of the strange world we live in.
it is. It is, and
So,
and everyone loves great stories. And I think in the corporate environment where I've basically spent most of my time, that's the world I know best, probably of all the spaces where you will do innovative, say, or innovation and innovative projects. I mean, these are not like daily business for most people. An innovation
mm,
project, a proper one, comes across once every 2 or 3 years in most people's careers. So it's something special, and you want it to be special, even if the mechanics that make it work could be fairly mundane and not very special. But yeah, that how do you tell stories at say birthday parties that way?
yeah.
Anyways,
So,
So
so Costas,
yeah.
can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into the innovation world? Because was it just the tweets? I mean, there's a bigger
No,
story
no, no,
there.
not no. If I give you the sequence of events, so first 10 years of my professional life were as an old school industrial design engineer. So I designed products and I got them through manufacturing, and it's nuts and bolts engineering basically with a little bit of styling and drawing around it. Through luck, I have no other word for it. I came across two people who eventually became my business partners in an agency called Happen. And this was back in 2005 that I met them. And they invited me as sort of an engineering support or product design support in a innovation project for Reckitt Benckiser, who owns one of the brands they own is Airwick, the little sort of air fresheners you plug into the
Yeah,
wall.
yeah.
And the team they were doing this work with, actually, there were two things that came together there. One is they worked for an agency called Synectics, which I ended up joining for 2 years. And Synectics brought, you could say, collaborative creativity into the room. So when you have a group of people together, what Synectics did, the methodology was really good for, was getting people to work collaboratively around a problem and come up with a solution or a mix of solutions. What they were lacking at the time was someone with any content expertise on how electrical devices work and how to create them. Now, what the other thing that was really interesting at the time, which was David, one of the two running that project, is he was doing a very early version of insight-led innovation. So rather than approaching innovation as a creative problem, what he realized was there's a lot more value in figuring out what is really the insight here, the need that you are trying to answer for. So it's like the contradiction, but in consumer language. So putting that up front is trying really to understand what is the problem that someone might experience in their home environment, in their, let's say, domestic, say, space that would be answered by some kind of fragrancing solution. Then all of a sudden you get much more focused in where you try to create new product ideas. And of course, there could be a whole range of reasons why people buy these devices. But getting closer to why they're buying them and what might still be frustrating them leads you much more directly to an answer, rather than just saying, well, imagine you're a gorilla in a circus. How would you solve this problem? It just takes you up into the stratosphere. And I mean, being creative is not the problem. You can squeeze creativity out of a rock if you need to. So anyway, that was my first sort of step into this world of mass market innovation, mass consumer market, I should say. I mean, very quickly, I mean, I came on board into Synectics. I mean, I quit my engineering life, which I'd sort of seen enough of after 10 years. And we developed, well, we started a new business between the three of us at the time, or four of us, I should actually say. And we developed a new set of methodologies to go just basically be much more focused around what the actual problems are of low innovation success rates in big companies. And this is not about necessarily the quality of the idea. It's about sort of who owns the innovation as a, let's say, function in the business. How do you get to the right business challenge to resolve with your new innovation? It's about getting to good insight, getting to do better ideas that are commercially viable. There's a whole mix of things we could talk about actually.
So where were you based geographically?
Geographically, I was in the Netherlands, and in particular, say David and Mark, my fellow founders, were in London. So they looked after the UK, and I looked after the rest of the world, which was a very stupid thing to do from a airline's
Lifestyle,
mileage
yes.
point of view. But in hindsight, it was the right decision for me. I had a young family, and I had no intent of sort of flying them across or sort of moving them around. So that worked well.
So
And
did you
eventually
turn into a bit of a globetrotter then, and meeting people from different silos?
Yes, well, there are different geographies for sure. So a bit like Daryl, I guess. And I don't know about yourself, Mike, but I know Daryl flew at least even more than I did. But the innovation challenges that we were pitching for and the projects we were winning were typical of, let's say, branded goods companies. Let's say so the Reckitt Benckiser's of the world, the Philipses of the world, etc. And those challenges at the time because we started this business in 2007, you can probably remember that period. I guess a couple of things came together. First of all, there was the financial crisis, which meant all of a sudden all the money for expensive innovation was gone, and you needed some real sort of effective, cheap stuff that could run off your existing factories. But it was also when the world was embracing let's say the first version of BRIC, so Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Those were the countries to go and where to. The reason why, of course, is because that's where the middle classes were coming into existence and growing.
Yeah.
I remember one of our clients in Reckitt Benckiser working on surface cleaners. He said, "Well, wherever people switch from a mud floor to a tiled floor, that's where we do business." And that's. So that's a very long answer to your question, Mike. Sorry, but that's how we.
So it sounds like you had a fairly well defined sector that you were going for. I mean, it's still a large sector, but
yeah, it's consumer goods, where there's no single consumer you can ask what they want, but where it's sort of a bit difficult to see, which is opaque,
and additionally, I think one of the constraints that you picked up and actually helped you was the fact that you didn't want to tear the whole thing down and start again. You wanted to innovate, but in an incremental way, if that's possible, Darren. He's not giving me a dirty look.
It's not illegal. I think for a lot of the FMCG companies, I think it's the idea of sustaining innovation, and we need a new product on the market next year and the year after. I think my experience has always been that there's a 1 year or 2 year or 2.5 year cycle, whatever it is. And I think the thing that frustrated me, I don't know whether it matches your experience, Costa, because I mean you mentioned frustration earlier. Frustration is the mother of
Yeah.
innovation. But when you get those situations where there is no longer any consumer frustration, but the innovation team has still got to do something.
Yeah.
I mean, what happens in those situations in your experience?
Yeah. So the maybe to again give you a long-winded answer. I think the problem that is overlooked in these bigger organizations, which can be huge. You can have like R&D on one continent, marketing on another continent, and production on a third continent. Is they kind of sometimes they lose sight of why they're innovating. So if innovation is the answer, what was the question? And within the Happen team at the time, let's say that was the name of the agency we built, there were only three answers to that question. It's either you do it to defend whatever you have, to protect it, or you do it to grow it, or you do it to transform it, whatever product or market you're in. And of course, every innovation team comes in with, oh, we want to transform, we want to be famous, we want to do the sexy stuff. But then when you dig a little deeper, then you realize really they're just looking to defend whatever they have. And then it might well be the topic of frustration isn't as dramatic as you would need it to be to show real growth, because you can do literally just like small tweaks to a product just to retain interest in it. And it might be consumer interest, but I guess in the case of our customers, their clients often were just as much the retailer sitting in between them and the end consumer as the end consumer itself, and just keeping a retailer entertained, so to say, with some new news to. I mean, it doesn't need dramatic levels of frustration. I think there's a connection to it. If I could make just a small sidestep, which is what is even more frustrating for us, or at least it was for me at the time, was when you can see your customer being very frustrated by lack of success, but not capable or just purely from an organizational structure to resolve it, because they don't understand yet what the potential paths to solution are. And a very simple example of that, connected actually to Mike, to the point you were making, we had a methodology which we called asset out innovation, which is taking the factory as a starting point and just saying, okay, what are you might have built this factory for one thing, but if we just change a few small bits, we might be able to create a lot more different things from it. That was a way of working which was so beyond, you could say, the regular tool set of our customers, that they would never ask for it. But even then, when you would show how it works, most of them would sort of struggle to grasp how that actually would work in practice, because for them, innovation it means big expenses, new factory lines, and a lot of work. And they would almost not believe that you could make a tweak simple enough.
This is kind of a bit like the people who used to make coaches.
Yeah.
And they invented the internal combustion engine and said, "Oh, we'll make cars."
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And of course, it's also how any small business innovates. I mean, there you have the people responsible for innovation, who are probably a combination of the sales team and the owner of the business. Then they sit, literally, their office is on top of the factory. They're not going to develop a new factory just to keep their customers happy. They're going to just look at that factory and say, okay, so we've been doing vanilla flavor for 2 years now. What would it take to do vanilla flavor with a sprinkle? Oh, actually, we just add one little device and customer's happy again.
So when did you come across Triz and Daryl's work?
It was actually, I think, still in the Synectics days. I mean, with Daryl, to be honest, it feels like we went to kindergarten together. I mean, it feels like but it was early days, probably around 2005, 2006.
Yeah,
and sort
it
of
was,
part
it
of
was,
this, gaining momentum to branch out and try this on our own. And the whole principle of just looking at ideas and solutions created before you actually start doing all the legwork yourself. I thought that was just fascinating. And so, and not just the working with contradictions, but also they could say some of the spin-off, almost like bonus, the gifts that keep on giving, like ideal final result, and just stuff that just you can always use, and it's just such common sense. It's almost makes it too easy for some people. They just think, okay, it can't be this easy. Well, yes, it can.
So it's Yeah, I mean, I think the whole, well, I say the whole truth community. I think the particularly Russian speaking part of the truth community have gone out of their way to make the whole thing sound really, really complicated. And yeah, I know I was very unpopular for a long while because I tried to make it simple.
Yeah.
But I think you're one of the few people that's actually saw how simple it was.
Well, yeah,
The,
it's simple in its premise. Of course, there's a huge amount of work that has gone into developing it, refining it. I probably, I don't know, incorrectly as sort of a proof point why it works so well. This is why the Russians were way ahead of the Americans in the 50s when it came to engineering, is through tools like this, and not inventing everything from scratch.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, I agree.
yeah.
Yeah, so going back to 2007, starting your own business, when the global financial crisis is coming up, is a pretty brave thing to do in the
It
first
wasn't.
place.
It wasn't. The financial crisis started literally. I think Lehman Brothers fell in like a month after we signed our first lease on our first office in London, and we thought, oh my God, there
Love it.
goes the mortgage. But no, but in hindsight, was the best thing that could have happened to us. So we're a combination because, first of all, we were way cheaper and more pragmatic than anyone else out there. We had already had a full year of business, which meant people knew us and sort of knew what we were good at. It forced us to, because of course you couldn't borrow money anywhere, so we had to build a healthy company that could sort of hold up its own pants, as you would say in Dutch, where I where I live. And Also, again, with the team, and for example, one of the things, it was Mark Cowan's brilliant idea at the beginning to do client events around what was going on in the world, where you would bring clients from literally different industries, different categories together. And I think we did, the first one we did was around the financial crisis, built around trust, when branded goods
Right.
companies realized that everyone's switching to private label, and we have nothing to show because they just look at the ingredients list on the back of the pack and they see, wow, there's actually more ingredients in a private label product than there is in this branded goods product. That's probably 20% more expensive. Why? So those kinds of issues, putting them on the table and debating them because it's what's really happening. That really, yeah, we came out of the financial crisis like quadrupled the size of the
Yeah, I mean,
business.
I often use the expression, don't let a good crisis go to waste. I think Happen
Yeah,
is a brilliant example of using the crisis. I mean, growing
yeah,
an innovation in terms of big business,
yeah,
and then along comes a big buyer. I mean, was that an easy decision to say, okay, it's time to
yeah. It's I mean, we the frustrating thing for us was we'd been what from the outside looked like a very stable company for like at least 4 or 5 years. On the inside, we were working really hard to try and sort of make it grow, probably to double it from where we were, because we were like
right,
65, 70 people towards the end of the journey. And we realized we just, well, as founders and leaders of the company, we didn't really have the skills, nor you could say the distribution that we were looking, because we'd kind of gone to as far as we could, definitely in a big market like the UK and some of the markets here in Western Europe. Um, but we needed a big partner to go further with
right.
that. And So yeah, we put the word out that we were looking for a potential buyer, and along came Accenture with a nice plan. Yeah,
So
Yeah.
that
So
was Accenture, did you say?
yeah. They bought the business in 2019. So in a way, we ran from crisis to crisis. We started in the financial crisis and we ended just before the Corona crisis. That's
it's absolutely perfect.
perfect timing. Yeah,
Prescient. Yeah,
yeah.
prescience rules. So I mean, was it your intention to? Because you're not part of Accenture now, right?
No,
Was your intention to to stay being part of that big family and help them to?
personally, yes, I thought this was going to be my third career.
Mhm.
I guess what does happen in a period like what because of course the Corona crisis did happen, like literally, the ink was barely dry on the contract, and
God.
the lockdown started. But also new leadership in Accenture and a much stronger focus on, for example, digital transformation, which has a lot of overlap with what Happen was doing, but not in a way that I was particularly, first of all, I guess, capable of even offering anything interesting, because I'm not a digital person. I'm a product and physical goods person. So after 2 years, at least I decided that was just not going to be good for me.
So
That's
so
that's how it ran. Yeah.
So it was the direction of travel rather than the stultifying influence of big company management that you found most difficult.
Yeah, the I think definitely coming into an organization like that is, first of all, much easier when you're like in your 30s, and I was about to turn 50. Because my counterparts, the other 50-year-olds in a business like that, have all been in that organization for more than 20 years and know it like the back of their hand. So they know how it works. I mean, I genuinely tried, not having worked in a corporate environment for a very long time, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't make it work. Not for me in a way that that I was going that I saw my happiness on the horizon. That's just, I
Well,
mean, it
no,
was sad. It wasn't
I
the
really
plan.
think
Yeah,
that because I've seen that process a couple of times in my career,
yeah,
and it was just heartbreaking. There was, we bought companies, and there was exciting, uh, very dynamic people that I was just longing to
yeah,
work for, and they were really excited because they were going to have lots of resources and the things that their dreams could be fulfilled at last with all these extra
yeah.
resources. And then they land and they're a virus, and the company just
It
tries to
kills it. Yeah.
destroy them and
It would
breaks
be
their
unfair
spirit.
to put it that way, and the because I don't want to make it sound like a sad story, so just to speak for whom I can speak for, which is me, um, a future of which was, it wasn't the plan that we were bought on. The plan we were part of was innovation literally in the portfolio of consumer goods companies, like we were doing
Mm,
within Happen, and that was um, where we were going to be growing. And because of course Accenture has a list of companies as long as, I mean, it's just a dream client list. But the
mm.
focus of the organization on the highest level changed, which just made that harder to sell. Because of course,
Yeah,
in a
okay,
big
yeah.
company like that, you need to get, even just writing a proposal for a client, you need sign off to have the budget to spend that time on it. And that just becomes harder to get when the focus of the business is elsewhere, because of course there's a
Mm.
layer of people between you and top of the business who just know, okay, this is not the type of work I'm going to look good for. I need to be something different.
Yeah,
I think
Yeah,
that is a very interesting problem, actually. How a big blue chip
yeah.
can actually take on smaller companies without crushing them. Have you?
It's not easy,
Yeah.
and you could make a case that maybe we were probably a bit too small, or there was not enough at stake for enough people for making this work. But on the other hand, the strategy changed anyway. So the question is, even if we were a bigger company, we would have still had it would have been tough, at least for me, to get excited about where that was heading, because it wasn't the original plan the business was sold on.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it feels like you're in a beautiful position now because you spend a lot of time, helping startups and advising startups. So in theory, startups are the place where it's far easier to innovate. I mean, different set of problems, and there's very few
Yeah,
resources.
yeah,
But I think the big con book came out last year, which says big consulting companies, they don't understand innovation at all, really, and so none of the agility that you need. So it's like you kind of fought between two rocks. Yeah, the big company that's got the resources, and the tiny company that's got no resources but all the agility.
yeah.
And I mean, you kind of bridge between those two things now. I mean, what's your perspective on the two rocks that are?
The two
Uh,
rocks, yeah. So maybe to clarify for people listening to the podcast, so since leaving Accenture, I've co-founded, I should say, an investment fund called Unaterra, which is specifically sort of operating in the world of sustainability, and within that, circular economy, looking not for startups, but more sort of scale-up level businesses that are doing something interesting there.
Good.
It's an interesting, it's a different set of issues getting in the way. So of course, for a big company, where innovation, sort of, let's say a big company, it's all about the assets you already have, and you want to make sure you keep using them because it's just too expensive to change the infrastructure of your own organization all the time, which kind of locks you in a particular path or sort of way of working. What I see actually is the opposite is a problem in small companies, and this is, and again, small companies in the world of is a venture capital, for lack of a better, or growth capital, for lack of a better word, we're not talking someone starting a bakery or something like the classic SME. We're talking about people with a particular idea for a business that can go big. The What is surprising, and it's part of our selection process even to consider whether or not a business is interesting. But what I find it surprising is the logic many of these businesses, small, we're talking like tiny businesses still, with a little bit of revenue, but their logic around growth is like a software business, even if they're in physical goods.
Right.
So they think literally as simple as just plugging in a few extra servers and adding some bandwidth, and then I don't know, buying customers through clickbait online will grow their business. And even when they're talking about physical products, so they're also talking about like new infrastructure in every possible way. So new supply chains, new distribution systems, new everything. Whereas what we're looking for are the businesses who actually respect the old infrastructure and say, okay, well, there's an existing supply chain. If you do paper cups, then I can guarantee you your winning solution is going to look a lot like a paper cup. And it's probably going to be made in the same way as a paper cup. And it's probably going to be bought by people who now are also buying paper cups. It's just your paper cup is a little better, cleaner, more sustainable, whatever, than the old one. So don't come to me saying you're going to disrupt the whole industry and turn it upside down, because I can tell you, you will not scale to 10 billion paper cups without needing a few billion in investment. It's just not going to happen. So for God's sake, give us a solution you can run on an existing line. Oh no, that's too hard. Yes, I know it's hard. That's why no one's doing it. And that's why the person who can do it will become very, very rich, because they can scale overnight. And it's so existing infrastructure in the world of mass markets and mass manufacturing is always the key to unlock. Whether you're a big business or a starting business, you have to respect it, because if you don't, you go bankrupt. So it's just too expensive. There's too much already there. So yeah, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, is that something that the sustainability community in particular is guilty of, in that you've got to change everything because the size of the global problems we've got. But
Yeah,
it's classic for me. It's classic. You can't get there from here, and as you
yeah.
say, you can't ignore all the infrastructure that's there.
No, you
You can't
can't. Yeah.
suddenly write it off tomorrow.
Well, I think the sinister truth is that because I mean, people tend to talk very badly about investors and it's all these big banks and they're all sort of doing all these evil things with all this money. Well, to be honest, I've seen a lot more evil on the side of startups, because most of them, and I'm going on record with this, are outright fraudulent. They have nothing that would ever work. But they've seen a metric somewhere listed by someone that is clearly of monetary value, and they're just creating not a business, but an investment vehicle that promises it can resolve that. But I mean, because again, the calendar year of 2022 was sort of the first year I really dived into this. I looked at 150 pitch decks, or had conversations, like 150, and there were less than 10 that I was interested in a second conversation, because they were literally at the level of, I mean, have you seen some of these? I'm going to draw all kinds of molecules that are bad molecules from the air, like nitrogen or carbon dioxide, and I'm going to turn them into meat. And that meat we're going to put on a plate, and people are going to eat it. And I'm just thinking, are you kidding? It's like, it's just, I mean, and there was like 1 month, I had 5 different candidates. I only spoke to one because I was too fed up after the first, who were promising inner city wind turbines. I mean, just even try getting those past city planning. I mean, it's just not going to work. And then the only thing I wanted to know was, so tell me, how does this compare to solar panels? Because that's who you're up against. And no one would give me a straight answer, because there is no answer. So the amount of snake oil out there is huge. And of course, that's because these businesses are not operating like my old world, which is you have to have some kind of P&L going on. No, the value of the business is defined by how many people you can get crazy enough to invest in it.
I just as an aside, you mentioned solar panels. I was reading today that the Chinese are so efficient at manufacturing them. There's such a glut that people are starting to use them as fence panels. because
Oh, don't say that. That's just awful.
because the expensive bit is putting on the roof and getting all the scaffolding, the people to do it,
Yeah,
and all the startups in
yeah,
Europe and the ones funded by the
yeah,
big Green New Deal are just going to be toast unless they get more support. Because even with massive, great big barriers in terms of tariffs,
yeah,
the Chinese are dumping them at such low costs. But
Mm.
going
yeah.
back more relevantly to that point, what I'm thinking is any ecosystem where there's lots of people around with big checkbooks is going to attract a lot of grifters.
Yes,
I
that is
suppose
very
the
true.
interesting thing
Yeah.
is how many are actually just wide-eyed innocent and how many are actually playing the game. Have you got any sense of that?
I find it hard to say. I mean, I would definitely
Hmm.
know. I would so uh, gut feel 15 to 20% knows their idea they've been probably spent a lot of money on already and have spent a lot of work on. No, it's never going to work. But they have raised money for it, and of course, their investors sitting there saying, "Well, you're going to continue raising money because I want mine out." That's a very dark motivation, but you can see them. I mean, and then there is a good half of them which is probably a little too naive, and they will need to rethink their offer quite a few times and probably land on something much more realistic. And then the remainder gets it, and then it's more of a question of can it be done fast enough before they run out of money, or before they start getting their first real customers on board.
So how?
Yeah,
I mean, you weren't an investor at all, so you've had to go from zero to
yeah.
doing the job. How did you go about that?
Um, well, I mean, it's a steep learning curve. I can tell you that.
Did you watch
Um,
YouTube videos?
no, I mean, at least well, the good thing is with the partners in Unaterra, they are more experienced with this, coming mostly from CVC, so corporate venturing, rather than from funds. But it is just for me the biggest challenge personally again was getting my head around what kind of metrics look good in this space and how to distinguish. Like in my old world, imagine like a 20-year younger me, I could not imagine starting a business without having my first customer already signed up. In the
Hmm.
world of, let's say, venture capital, that is highly not normal. Um, and again, it's also a distinction for me. What is a small business? Because I won't call them investment vehicles because that's like a big bulk. I'm just not interested in personally. But the small businesses who have a good idea, a good proposition, where you know this can scale, it will work, um, but they will also have their eyes on who are my first customers and what does this market look like, rather than how do I raise more money. And and
So
so
going back to your
yeah.
2022 of I looked at 150. I've got down to conversation with 10. I mean, how do you go beyond that? And how many investments come out of
Yeah,
that?
so well, I guess from those 150, we only invested in two. The others just came through the network of, well, particularly say my fellow founder Luca. Once, because I guess the greatest source of what businesses to invest in won't come through, let's say, the typical sort of accelerators in this whole industry is that just coughing out
Yeah.
investment vehicles. They will come through fellow investors in other businesses, because I mean, they've put their money where their mouth is. They understand why they were interested in a particular business and why we would be interested. And that's where you get the nice introductions. And they come a little bit through, let's say, different channels. Let's put it that way. Um, but I mean, yeah, but again, particularly say on the topic of, let's say, sustainability and for the planet companies. Also, what is easily forgotten is how naive and immature this space still is. I mean, it's literally
Mm,
5 years
right.
old. So
Yeah.
of course it's still full of quacks and weirdos, because it's just young. It's not like investing in a social media platform like that's been happening for like a good 20 years now, or investing in a bakery, which has been going for 2,000 years or 5,000 years. So but it's not going to get easier soon. That's one thing I have seen, because also say having now met quite a few representatives of, let's say, institutional investors like pension funds and who are all saying, oh, we have billions just ready to invest. Of course, these are populated by people who are used to investing in, I don't know, like in oil fields or stuff like that, which you can literally put an Excel sheet together, calculate your returns, your risk profiles, and everything. And now you're saying you need to invest in, well, it's already like, actually solar panels and wind is already a lot more mature than some of these things are. But you can just see they're calling metrics, and then there's like a big gap between the metrics and the actual companies that need to deliver those metrics. So you could just see this whole space where all kinds of ugly stuff is going to continue to happen for at least another 10 years before this becomes a little more mature. That's just the reality. And we'll just have to navigate through that. I mean, it's not it's not easy.
The people you're meeting, are they predominantly young people?
The founders of companies, you mean?
Yes.
It's a mix, actually. The ones we've invested in are all in their 30s and 40s, and that is because
young as well, I could say.
Yeah. So from my point of view, that's still young, but it's definitely not. I mean, and in their teams there might be a lot of 20-year-olds or 20-somethings. But I think I can say without exception, these are all people who have had quite a lot of traction in an industry and then are now innovating in either the same industry or an adjacent industry.
But they'd be educated, what, 10 or 15 years ago. I'm just wondering, you know, the whole meme of starting a Google in your garage sort of thing. Is that something that they're all aspiring to do?
I think yes and no. I do think what has changed a lot, of course, in the past, 20, 25 years of venture capital sort of being as big as it is as a sort of financial industry, is the realization that if you have a good story and a good product idea, you can raise money to the level that at least you won't have to start in a garage. You can actually hire an office and start with a team. So, I mean, I remember reading somewhere, okay, this is a bit of a sidestep, but if you want to start, actually back to the bakery, if you want to start a bakery, you need family, you need friends, you need a good bank, and you need a plan, and then you need to find a place to start a bakery. If you want to take over a $1 billion industry, you just need friends. So I think there is something there that I think this is different from when I basically, because I left university in the mid 90s. Starting a business then was much more sort of low key, and because there wasn't this big domain you could go out sourcing money, because we needed you could say the Silicon Valley sort of rise.
I think I've seen, I think in parallel with that, and it's perhaps a portal linked to the sea of entrepreneurs out there, or people that think they're entrepreneurs, is lots of academic institutions have set up entrepreneurial programs to help create and foster entrepreneurs. I think my exposure to those academic communities seems to be that they're career academics trying to teach entrepreneurs how to be entrepreneurs, and it's as the
but this is no different in the corporate environment, which also went through this phase about 10 years ago. They were all starting their own accelerators and their own pods, and these were all people who were career corporates and smart people, but not entrepreneurs. I mean, no one was in danger of not being paid if the product didn't work. And without naming names, I've seen now even on LinkedIn also people posting about their experiences working inside corporate accelerators, literally with messages, oh, we've burned through 10 million pounds. What we learned. I mean, what do you mean? I would have been bankrupt if I'd done that. You burned someone else's money. Great. Good for you that you managed to do that. Yeah.
what is your personal view on the characteristics of an entrepreneur? What makes him stand out or her from other people?
Well, the main thing is skin in the game in some form, and it's not only time. Time is cheap. Um,
Mm.
you need to be willing to put a significant amount of money in. And significant can mean different things at different stages. It could mean £20,000 just to start and see what happens 3 months from now. It could be 100,000 for 2 years, but it has to be something, because if it's just time, you can walk away at any time. Whereas when you have money
Yeah.
in, you can't. That's a big difference. I think you should also always acknowledge that the difference between a successful or financially successful entrepreneur and a financially unsuccessful one is razor thin. The difference is almost non-existent. These people are just as fanatic. They have just as much belief in their product. They're just as much everything. And it might just be luck,
Mm,
the difference
mm,
between the two.
Yeah.
One might be 2 months early and the other might be just on time. And one might have become a huge success if that one client hadn't been dragging their feet. Whereas the big
Right.
successes might have just as much failed. And a lot of the stories out there are winner's bias all over, because yeah, I mean, even looking at our own, I mean, we were relatively successful financially because we managed to sell a consulting business, which doesn't happen very often. Um, on the other hand, had the Corona crisis started 3 months earlier, we would have not sold
Mm.
the business. That's for sure.
Yeah. Right.
So it could just have, and then I would still be in happy. I would still probably have a nice life and be happy, and maybe a slightly smaller happen team. Because again, it's also hard to realize when you're in the middle of a crisis like that. You don't know when it's going to end. You just know
Right.
it's bad
Yeah.
news every day. Um,
So,
so
so
yeah, sorry, that's
yeah,
not really an answer to your
sorry,
question,
yeah,
Mark. I went off on a
doesn't
tangent.
matter, doesn't matter. So, as an investor, you're not like a bank. You just don't say, "Here's your money, give me reports every X time periods."
Yeah.
Do you kind of roll your sleeves up and help them on their way?
Well, that's what we try. I mean, and the reality is with the fund is we've formally not done our first close, so all our involvements with businesses we've invested in so far are fairly light touch. But I've taken personally a stake in a packaging company called MICVAC, and it's like every board meeting I do try to really help and also to really push and just show that was more of it's a term I don't really like, but it kind of covers it. But the art of the possible, sort of guys, you're now, because this is a packaging company, which is a big player in a tiny market. And I think over the past 6 months, I have helped them sort of realize that they could be a fairly, I mean, a good sized player in a huge market if they just sort of focus their attention in that way. But on the other hand, I mean,
It's also
I'm not in the
having,
business.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
with the leadership, trying to help them work through it.
it's having the imagination to see
Yeah,
yourself as a winner in that market rather than just hanging on to the coattails and just surviving.
yeah, totally.
Uh,
It is. Let's be honest, because salaries have to be paid in these businesses,
mm.
and they are, even if they have outside investment from some kind of, definitely this company MICVAC in Sweden. I mean, they have a P&L to 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 work every year, and if there's nothing left at the end of the year, nothing much is going to happen the next year. So
Mm.
that's just the
Right.
operational.
So what you're saying, it's not like some of the well, all the big IT companies, Google and Alphabet, and they all ran for ages, making a huge losses, and they didn't even have an idea of how they were going to
No,
make money. Uh,
no, and that's that. I guess the world I come from, and I guess it's true for many people in the corporate environment. This whole thing of what startups call product market fit. Like, okay, I have a product idea. I'm not going to see who has the problem. My product answers. It's just bizarre if you think about it. And but here's the other thing. With speaking of winner's bias, I guess there's even something like a false loser's bias, which is if you look at who are heralded as the heroes of this era. Let's take, well, my pet piss on company, which is Uber. They lost $30 billion
wow.
to get where they are,
Mm.
and they're making now. I think they posted their first, at least on paper, profit of 300 million last year. They're never going to make billions in profit a year. So that means whomever sank their money in there, most of these people are never going to see it back. And the only
Because
ones
it's a
who made
low
money,
margin business, isn't it?
exactly. So, I mean, don't underestimate the sort of the pulling power a story has like that. This is seen as a
Right.
successful innovation when it wouldn't work in any other domain. I can take $30 billion and revolutionize the whole pet food industry in 2 years' time because I'm just going to give away product for free, and I'll still have money left in the bank after that. It's just a bizarre way of thinking that you can sponsor your way to success, and it's unfair too, because imagine if you were a family-owned taxi company, your business would have been destroyed by money coming from a completely different industry where
Yeah.
basically with much higher margins, and it's just dumped in yours. I find that a bit scary, to be honest. But it is
Hmm.
it's become the benchmark or a benchmark for what good innovation looks like, and I'm just thinking, no, it isn't. That's just something else. I don't know what it is, what name to give it, but it's not.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
I'm with you on that front. Yeah, I mean, I use a slide of here's 18. It's usually 18 to 20 pictures. Yeah, how many innovations can you see? And Uber's one of the pictures usually, and yeah, almost invariably people will say, yeah, there's an innovation, and it's like, well, I think you've got to work out what do you mean by successful. If innovation definition involves the word success, what do you
yeah,
mean by success? And it becoming a verb and raising lots of money is some people's measure of success, but I think in
yeah.
innovation terms, you can't say that it is. But there's good fortune again. I mean, so as an investor, how do you build that factor into the discussions you have with companies and whether
Well,
to
the
invest?
yeah. So that's funny because I guess differently from VC, the typical VC fund manager or investor that I've come across so far, if you ask them what's important for you when you look at a potential company, they will always say the team, team, just the team.
Yeah,
And then maybe like far beyond that come things like, oh, sorry, the second thing will then be size of the market. Oh, how big is this market? And it's probably some new market that doesn't exist yet. So you can basically just shout out any number you want because it doesn't exist. Um, and then far after that come things like, okay, what's the actual product that they have? What's the problem they're answering? Who are the customers that are going to buy this? And I think the businesses we've been attracted to and have now engaged with are all, they just don't work that way. They have, first and foremost, rock solid proposition. They understand the market they're in, not a new market they're going to create, because new
okay,
markets do not come out of nowhere, definitely not billion-dollar markets. These are existing markets where you need to convince a current buyer to stop buying what they're now buying and to move to your product for a very, very good reason. And the very good reason is probably not going to be that your product is more sustainable and more expensive. Your product
right,
probably has to
yeah,
perform on par or better and be more sustainable.
right,
Um,
yeah,
and then you get a very different type of conversation because of course the people in these businesses just have a different look on what they're doing, and they realize they found a big contradiction or a big problem with an existing industry or even a small sort of activity within an industry, and found a way to monetize that. And then you just have a different. So also when you invest, what every, let's say, again, this is all stuff was relatively new language for me. But when capital is raised, when they do a big fundraising, every business will have to explain where's that money going, and if the money is going into things that will help grow that product idea to reach more people, to basically to drive sales, then you know there's a healthy entrepreneur or entrepreneurial thinking behind it. If it's just a sponsor product to make your product cheaper than whatever else is out there, and to try and buy customers, then you know it's probably not the type, at least that I could understand and could even help. I
right,
mean,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny on the sustainability front. My annual bang your head against a brick wall moment is going to speak at some kind of sustainability conference, and
yeah,
consistently I've been making the point that exactly as you've said, you can't expect people to pay a premium for something that's more sustainable. You've got to solve the contradiction.
Absolutely.
It's got to be sustainable and cheaper, sustainable and better performance. And it feels like, still when I have those discussions at the sustainability conference, talking to these people, I just don't get it. It's like, people should be prepared to sacrifice
Yeah.
for the sustainability benefit. And it's like, well, that's just not the way the world works.
It's
Right, here's the thought, man, which is a bit left field. So I've been thinking about a lot of businesses and the kind of they remind me of the robber barons of beginning of the century. And I'm just wondering whether business schools teach pushing the ethical boundaries to the very limit and then a little bit more. Because it strikes me that an awful lot of very successful businesses just do that. They pay lip service to ethics and they go full out to find weaknesses in the market, find weaknesses in people's psychology, find the most vulnerable people, exploit them to the maximum within the law and then a little bit more because they've got good lawyers. And that is the essence of a successful capitalist. And that's why some venture capitalists have a bad reputation. And I'm just wondering whether the sustainability world needs some of those types in it to kick ass.
That's a dark picture, Mark.
I was the skeptical on this.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say what you're saying is untrue for a probably smaller portion, but because in a way this is also true for the big corporates. I have two thoughts for you. One is this won't last forever because the problem these kinds of businesses have after a few years is they cannot recruit new talent because the new talent doesn't want to be associated with a business that operates like a robber baron.
I would question that. I think there's a lot of people that
mercenaries will do that. And you need so because you can even see it in well, you definitely see it in some of the food companies that were major clients of ours. Is they've now gone so far down the route of over optimizing their food products that there's barely anything left there. So R&D work, for example, becomes just endless cost optimization projects. I mean, no one wants to work there, and because it's not an exciting future. You're not working on something which is going to be so. Over very long periods of time, I think that is just a path to extinction. I guess what frustrates me, particularly when it comes to sustainability, is I think actually to your point, some of that cunning is actually part of the solution. Now, the closest I've heard this from a corporate voice was actually through Coca-Cola saying the path to sustainability is through productivity. But what you see is this is where businesses get into their own way, or if it's tangled in their own underwear, is I think the expression in English, which is if you would look at the topic of sustainability and you would ask yourself, who owns this inside a large organization? Who has this on their KPI? Like, as in, if we fail at this, that means no bonus. Who owns this? So there's really only two places you can put this. One is, let's say, on the people who create the demand side sort of stuff. So there's marketing teams, basically people responsible for selling it. If they own sustainability, the only thing they can really do is what you call greenwashing, because they can tell green stories around existing products. What is really interesting is if you look at the supply side of the business, then you can actually do it quite easily between brackets, because if you just use less material and less energy, you've probably already done something which is also good for the planet and saves you money. But here's the problem, because that was one of the things that I sort of clocked actually pretty soon in my path down the sustainability universe, into the sustainability universe. But here's the problem. Those two functions inside an organization struggle to work together, because when a supply chain team does a cost optimization program, which they're doing all the time, it's basically the only thing they do, the one thing they're not allowed to touch is anything a consumer, customer, or in particular their own marketing team would notice. It's immediately no go. And the other way around, so if you're in purely sort of on a marketing and you're creating like new activation for the product, you're trying to sell it, the moment you try to change the formulation or the design or whatever, you get into trouble with the supply side people. So they're always in trouble. And I mean, we built a whole agency because these two domains are in trouble always, and they would sort of never really share responsibility for anything. But this becomes heightened in the case of sustainability, because what you need to be able to do as an organization is say, we're going to make this product cheaper and better, which means redesigning it. But as a consequence, then your Better for Planet stuff needs to be owned by two very different functions inside this business.
Yeah.
And there are so few organizations that can do that. I mean, it's mind-boggling. That's where
you could say the essence of your business was kind of marriage counselor.
Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah.
We've talked in past episodes about this idea of horizontal wisdom and being able to connect the dots. And it feels like, Happen was exactly the dot connector between those two different worlds. And trying to get them to see things from the other's perspective. And the contradiction is between the two of them.
Yeah.
And until you can solve that contradiction between the two, then neither's going to be happy. Again, I mean, do you think those problems are solvable with the organisation structures that the big corporates have got today?
Yeah, it's I don't really see an easy path through, because I've also been thinking, even from the Unaterra, from the fund perspective, can we offer also a service that helps this happen inside larger organizations?
Yeah.
The worlds are so far apart, and there's not enough pressure yet to do it. That's the thing. Most of them, I mean, it's really, again, Mike, to your point of sinister realities, if you are now facing, for example, regulation, saying you're going to be fined if you don't or sort your waste better or make your packaging recyclable, then you will for sure also have a significant number of CFOs sitting in the business and just doing a little sheet saying, so how many fines were we paying this year? And sort of, oh,
Right,
wow.
yeah.
Oh, actually, that's not bad. We can do this for at least 10 more years before it becomes too expensive and we better invest in new machinery. Because that's how it works. I mean, in the end, it has to be commercially sensible. Otherwise, these organizations just won't move.
No, that chimes with me, because we used to sell computer systems into local government effectively, and because they could, they just made the commercial terms harder and harder and harder in terms of time to fix and things like that. And it got to the stage where it was impossible to achieve. So you would be looking at the payment penalties and basically putting up the cost to the customer because you knew you weren't going to meet those targets.
Yeah.
Which is not what they were trying to achieve.
No, it's bizarre. Yeah.
So going back to the coaching side of things, I appreciate that you haven't really got into it, but I'm sure you've thought about it. Is the innovation side going to be a big part of that? Because have they already made the breakthrough?
Most of them have made the breakthrough, or know where it can be found, but maybe haven't thought through yet. Let's take this Swedish packaging company as an example. They have created a packaging solution for ready-made meals that uses way less energy to create the meal. I mean, they don't make the meals themselves. They sell this to the meal creators, let's put it that way, to the kitchens. But because they use less energy, two things happen. One is, of course, it's great from a sustainability point of view because your energy bill comes down. But also when you heat these products for like literally 80% less of a normal production method, the taste is much better. It's not cooked to mush. And I guess so technically they've managed this. They now also have all the other sort of like you need to have a monomaterial. They're working on a fiber-based solution as well. So all these things are in the pipeline, but it's a little bit like the two domains of supply side and demand side that we were talking about. The area where they are not strong is how do you sell this? How do you? Yes, it's a solution to a problem we know exists, but how do you bring that up to like a burning platform level for your potential customers? Because again, your customers will not buy this because of your bright blue eyes and the fantastic story around taste. They are going to take a lot of risk stopping whatever they're doing now to switch to this solution. And they need to see some very significant benefits of doing that, which will mostly be commercial in nature or with regards to their customers.
So
And that's
how big are the barriers to entry for any? I'm thinking the customer would be supermarkets, yeah.
the customers in this case would be the food manufacturers. But to give you a sense of the numbers
Oh,
here,
okay,
so
yeah.
so this is a business that do 30 million packs a year, roughly, which sounds like a big number. Yeah, it's big if you're in Sweden, but if you go to the UK and you win one client, one of the four big players in the
Yeah,
UK,
yeah,
one
yeah.
line, like their mashed potato line, for example, then you double your business. So the scale in a market like the UK is like it's like 30, 40 times what you would see in a small market like Sweden. So the potential is huge, but the risk is also huge because if you mess one of those up, then not only are you basically costing your customer a lot of money, but you basically ruin your reputation amongst a lot of players at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's something that takes time, but it's also just being very sort of on the ball with, okay, how do I convert all these issues I see on this customer or potential customer side into a way of explaining what I'm doing as a way to resolve those problems. So it's funny because even like because you would think it's a technical product, it's basically commodity, it's bulk, it's still a consultative sell. You really have to get into how does that customer operate in order for them to dare to make the switch.
It's about storytelling, but is it also about business innovation? Because one of the things I still find is as soon as you use the word innovation, people immediately connect to it's a technical thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of the opportunities, and it sounds like this Swedish packaging company, the opportunity is a business innovation, one which says, let me show you how I'm going to manage risk with you.
Yes.
To make the transition.
Yeah.
But does the business world understand that they can innovate too?
I think so, but the business world is the same as every other world, which is people have jobs that involve targets, and usually those targets don't involve changing things.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So So when you make the change, things will get worse. Nobody's got a KPI that says things are going to get worse this year.
Or I might actually make a dramatic improvement, but it requires changing a few things more than a little bit. That's a lot of explaining to do internally. So again, these
if you put yourself in the position of a purchasing guy who's maybe talking to your company, you look at the risk reward, and there's a hell of a lot of risk there. If it's not the right, it's like investing. If it's not the right bet,
totally, which
you're
is
going to
also
get a kick in.
why you shouldn't talk to the procurement team. You should talk to their marketers, to their chefs, to all the people who have something to gain by what your product solution can offer. And the procurement team is not going to. That's not in their interest to be to that level of detail. But it also means it's a lot more. It requires more time. I mean, it's just not an easy transition to make.
Does this go back to your point of when you're innovating? There's not somebody who's manager of innovation. You go knock on his door and say, it's the same when you're introducing a new product. Is where do you start? The gateway is not very obvious.
I think, Mike, it goes beyond that because I think a lot of organisations do have an innovation function, but it's another silo. So I think what Costas you're describing is we're back to this horizontal thing of you need to be able to sell across the silos, not talk to the procurement person that you would normally talk to. You need to talk to the other silos to get the overall system to see that there's the net benefit, rather than the procurement person who's only seeing that my targets aren't going to be met this year.
Yes, exactly. The procurement team, their responsibility comes down to responsible procurement of materials in a way that doesn't put the business at risk in any way. So if anything, showing something new which has benefits other than supply chain risk reduction is just not going to land because it's not in their interest to get involved with that. It'll just take them time.
So here's a couple of more points just occurred to me. You said that the team is all important, okay? And my guess is the lead person, man, woman is the most important. And I would have thought their selling ability would be the most important thing you're looking for. Is that true?
Well, that's definitely what we look for. It's not what is
Right.
the norm in normal venture capital. That's clear for because a lot of these businesses are not interested necessarily in selling product. They're interested in raising money.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean, I think, Mike, if I understood you right earlier, Costa, I think you said the team was fairly low on the priority list in terms of you've got to get a bunch of the technical stuff and the ecosystem stuff right before you start worrying about who can tell the story
yeah,
and who the team is.
of course, you need a quality, let's say, founder and sort of small team around that person. But again, smart people and capable people you can hire
Mm.
and find. It's much harder to turn around a bad idea into a good one, um, especially if
Yeah.
the clock's ticking. That's the thing. So many of these businesses in this domain are in a perpetual state of running out of money, which means everything is under pressure, and that's that just makes it harder, especially if you know they're onto something good. Because again, it's not all dark. There are some very good ones out there, and the ones we're engaged with, I really like because they're good businesses, but they are still at a early stage where there's more money needing to go in than is coming out.
Mm.
Um,
It's yeah. I mean, I think we're seeing in the innovation research team that the whole domain of ecosystem innovation, yeah, is the next challenge because I think
mhm.
where you've got capitalism and so all that competition, yeah, then in an ecosystem world that doesn't work anymore because if any one player in the ecosystem says, "Well, I'm not playing your game," then that's the end of your innovation opportunity.
Mm.
And I don't think I see academia being able to teach ecosystem or even systems in many ways, but certainly not ecosystem how to operate in an ecosystem. Um, so are we back to another can't get there from here situation where your
Yeah.
Swedish company says, "Well, okay, well, why am I having to be the pioneer in selling this thing which is from the performance figures you say is absolutely brilliant. It's a no brainer,
Yeah.
and yet the ecosystem says, well, yeah, I don't get it.
Well, it's not like doors are shut in any way. The doors are just about to open. I think the factor that works in the benefit of MICFAC, this company, is that they are already making money and they have a
Right,
profit
right,
at the end. So they have the time.
yeah,
Because to your point, the ecosystem, in the end, it's people. It's relationships between people. It's people who are used to buying from each other and exchanging value in some kind. And that just takes time because also, just like I said, you have to switch away from one solution to another. If you're in the business to business environment, you're probably switching away from one friend, hoping to make another
yeah,
friend. It maybe might be someone you've been in business with for
yeah,
10 years.
yeah, right, love it.
And so and this is, you could say, the challenge, which is innate to a lot of these, let's say, startups in the modern sense of the word, is because they're always running out of money, they're trying to do something which would take a normal business 20 years, and they're trying to do it in 5.
Mm.
And that's just why there's this pressure on it, which is, and this is paradoxical, I guess, because it's abbreviated by spending too much time trying to raise money. It's the only way to accelerate it is to try and find customers, because they will
Okay,
teach you what
yeah.
the right type of product is at the right price point. And then, again, that is such a I've even, because I mean, my LinkedIn profile, as you can imagine, is full of big corporate, say, businesses and the people working there. I've had startups ask me for introductions to these businesses, and they would always say, "Well, but I don't know anyone in procurement there, but I can introduce you maybe to a marketing person or whatever." I said, "No, no, no, no. We want to be introduced to the M&A team." I said, "Why do you want to talk to the M&A team?" Because we need money. I said, yeah, sell them product. I mean, you'll make money. And it's just, you just realize some of these kids are just wired differently. Yeah,
I love it. I mean, it feels like we're kind of coming back to full circle to
yeah,
luck again, which, as somebody who runs a company called Systematic Innovation, kind
yeah,
of scares me a little bit. But I mean, I'm thinking about all the business books that I've read over the
yeah,
years, and there's probably one or two that talk about luck and how you build luck into the process. But it's almost like a taboo subject. That's that's how do you write a
yeah.
book about that? How can you academically justify that luck plays a role in this story. But so this coming full circle. What do you end up with when it comes to good fortune and your experience with
Yeah, it's a very
investing?
good it's an absolute keyword. I mean, from the Happen days, I have a small deck which has 50 thumbnails of products that we were allowed to talk about publicly. We ran, of course, many more projects, but those were the 50 stories we were allowed to tell in any audience. And all of these stories have an element of luck in there, like all of them,
Right,
without
right,
exception.
yeah,
And luck sounds like something which is almost like something unfair, or how do you? But it's in a way, it's I guess it's the unexpected, which is another way of describing luck. But also, what we had not done in any of these examples is taken out all the risk. And of course, taking out all the risk is what every, say, more sort of accountant-oriented business person wants. But then
yeah,
you also remove all the chance for luck because you're trying to predict everything that's going to happen.
yeah. I love
And
that. Yeah,
yeah, so and this is, I mean,
Well,
there's yeah,
I'm thinking this comes back to grit. So, firstly, you've talked about these poor people, running to stay still in the startups. They've got to have a lot of grit to
hmm
just keep doing that year after year and maintain the belief that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
yeah,
And luck is luck. It's random at the end of the
yeah,
day. But this is a very subjective thing. But I've noticed I'm quite a lucky person,
hmm
and statistically that doesn't make any sense.
yeah,
But it's maybe that when bad things happen to me, I just kind of shrug them off and keep going
yeah,
because I'm thinking of books I've read, and I think Steve Jobs or people like that they don't succeed on the first attempt. They get up, they start again, and
yeah,
that's so. And it's probably the same with investing. You just got to spread your bets, and
yeah,
you pick the people who are going to be lucky because they're doing it right, and some of
yeah.
them are going to fall by the wayside. So it's which is exactly what good gamblers do. They play the odds.
Yeah, but there's, I think also, and I think I think we're completely agreeing on this. I would also call it out. There's something deeply philosophical in there, which is understanding that it's not all knowable, and
Yeah,
being
yeah.
comfortable moving when you don't have the full picture. And if there is, I mean, going back to what does a good entrepreneur look like, or even what does a good, innovative, creative person look like? It's someone who dares move on little information, knowing they can make it right as they go along. And of course, you
yeah,
cannot repair everything because some things are just fundamentally flawed if they're not thinking it through well.
Yeah,
But if in basis the core idea is the right one, the industry has a particular need, you can answer with that idea, then how much more do you need before you move and start sort of
right.
touching reality, which will inform you way better than any piece of research or anything like that can do. And this is because I know this changed even over the period with the Happen agency. Was in the early days we had customers, including some very big ones, who would do pilot markets. They would just launch a product in a small market and see how it does and learn from that. That
Yeah,
disappeared, and it became just doing
oh,
big quant
really?
studies. Yeah, they would just revert to, because it's cleaner, it looks cleaner to just do it with quantitative research based on surveys, etc., which you can probably also manipulate a little bit to get it to
Yeah,
answer what you
yeah.
want. And then they would do massive launches across multiple countries in one go. And of course, they would fail as often as they succeed. But yeah, it's
I bet they're spending more money on the research now than they actually were on the
yeah,
pilots.
I think
yeah,
what's bizarre is that expressions like minimum viable product and agile, are part of the lexicon of business these days. So in theory, everybody understands. You try something, learn from it,
yeah.
iterate,
Go find
and
someone
yet,
who actually does it. That
right,
that
yeah,
few and far between. Yeah, everyone talks about it, but no one does it. Yeah, that's just that they don't. Yeah, they maybe do it within their own little function, and then they blame the other function for nothing happening.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Right,
I love
I'm
that.
going to spoil the party because we're having a great conversation. I think
Oh, sorry, Mike. Yeah.
we'll have to have you back again because you're very erudite and very perspicacious. That's not even the right word, is it? We've
What
got
is
too
that
many
word?
syllables in.
Wow. I'm also your first non-native speaker, I think, so I need to look those words up.
Well, I'm just confusing. But so the final question is: in your new role as the money man, is is it floating your boat? Do you like it? Is it a good thing?
I like it. I must say, I find we're spending way too much time finding money, because the world that has the money doesn't operate according to metrics that work in very innovative environments or immature markets that still need to find their way. And it's a paradox, because they all want to get involved, but then they realize the level of insecurity. I won't say risk, because I think the risk is very low in some of these businesses, because everyone wants what they do, but because they cannot translate it into metrics that are accepted by, let's say, the big providers of money,
Mm.
it's just a very it's that's a big gap, and I just that's the one thing I found very hard personally. Just the number of people you need to talk to, just to unlock a little bit of cash to go to the right place. Because I mean, I have no doubt about businesses we've invested in.
Mm.
What I was just thinking, well, this should be an easy decision, guys. I mean, look at this. It's almost like when you could, if it's on sustainability, if you could just show, guys, this thing uses less energy than the old one it's replacing. How many metrics do you need? Oh, well, we need, and then some kind of SDG, whatever, sort of, but what is it doing for, I don't know, pollution here, pollution there? Just like, come on, it's not that complicated. You can dumb it down.
Yeah,
Don't get in
yeah.
the way of your own sort of ambitions.
Which is, in my view, why your boats are grumpy. You see, because you can see this stuff, and it's just so plain and obvious to you, and you
Yeah.
can do handstands and you can do diagrams and you can talk to all day long, and people don't get it, and that's very frustrating, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the paradox to think about tonight, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe you should,
Right.
maybe I'll look around my network, see if I can find a good banker for you to talk to in one of your next podcasts. So just talk about financial considerations and
Yeah,
Oh,
risk
yes.
profiles,
Yes.
asset
Well,
classes.
okay.
Yes.
Paradoxes. A non-boring banker. Okay.
They're probably out there.
Mikey, that's your challenge. They're going to pass the Mikey test.
Right. So let's say goodbye to our listeners.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you
Mikey,
very
for
much.
Costas. Yeah, real pleasure talking to you, and yeah, some great insight for us. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Well,
and
thank
do
you for
tell
having
us your
me.
second name as well.
Well, I must admit, I don't even know how to pronounce my surname because I don't speak Greek.
Oh, fair enough.
I did check, even though I've known you for nearly 20 years, Costas, I did check. There are various engines that will tell me the pronunciation of Papaikonomou. Oh, see, I've messed it up now. There's several
That's
different
why
ones.
I didn't do
Yeah.
it.
Don't even try.
I gave
It's
it. I
just
gave it a shot. It didn't go well. I gave it a shot.
Right, so that's the end of the episode. Just have you okay for a couple more minutes?
Yes.
So yeah, thank you very much. That was interesting. Yes, don't worry that it went over because we were having a good conversation.
Yeah.
One of the things we're having trouble with Daryl's stuff is just explaining it to me, not to me, to other people. And I reckon that you're pretty damn good at that.
Explaining
So,
Daryl's stuff.
well,
I
no,
love
no.
Daryl's stuff. I just reproduce it.
Explaining stuff in general. I think
No,
that
no, you've had a similar problem. It's what Daryl says. Somewhere,
Yeah.
somebody solved the problem,
Yeah.
and I think you might be one of the people that have solved the problem that Shana and Daryl and I have been struggling with. Partly because Daryl tries his best to make it hard for us.
Uh,
So
so how can I help?
I was just wondering whether that would make if we got you back, if you want to come back, an interesting subject.
Yeah, it would. So is the subject then deciphering Daryl?
Hopefully not
No,
me, but
Yeah,
but I think the messaging. I mean, I always thought that in Happen, you were the person that always came up with the brilliant insight at the end. That this is the way you message this. I mean, you
yeah,
did it with Pancensic, for example. Yeah,
yeah. I'm
and
pretty good at
it's
that sort of
yeah,
the translation step. I know.
yeah,
What actually helps is not being a native speaker and needing simpler language to say things. Um, I think it would be a great topic, sort of, around sort of hard truths explained in a way that they will be absorbed.
yeah, yes,
Um, I think there is
yes,
particularly with
yes.
someone like Shauna in the mix, which brings the psychological factor, I guess, from what I've heard from her in on the podcast. Because it's also there's an element there which is about wanting to know the answer, and actually, if you go back to one of the questions you asked, sort of what around sort of innovation, success, etc. I mean, it particularly comes to people who want it to succeed, which is not everyone. That's the frustrating
right,
thing.
yeah,
Most people are just not in the innovation game to innovate. They
Well,
are just
yeah,
here's a great story. Uh, I should have done this on the pod, but anyway, uh, there was an article about this company that just doesn't have any managers at all. They make tomatoes or something,
yeah,
and but they have real problem recruiting the people to work in that managers because they've got to take responsibility. And my dad was he's an electrician. He was a foreman for Rolls Royce, and then he worked for a train operating company. And it and, and it's very traditional. The train very traditional. It's gone on for ages, and they got some really weird practices. But there's a certificate for managing people, and he was on a course with 30 other people. And he was thinking, these guys, the people on the course, half of them, I can't believe how stupid they are. They're absolutely incredibly stupid. Because the poor instructor was trying to help them pass a multiple choice, and there was
yeah,
one that was obviously not the right answer, and there was two that might be the answer, and he was telling them, well, you don't want to choose that one, and they were choosing. So he got out after this experience and he asked somebody, he said, that lot, they're really thick. I can't believe how thick they are. And he said, no, they're not. None of them wants to manage people. So,
yeah.
so they're all
It's a Peter
deliberately
principle.
flunking the
Yeah.
test.
Um,
sounds like UK industry.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, so that's
So
I've read the last steel mill is being shut down now in the UK.
Uh,
in the Welsh one,
Yeah,
yeah,
no more
yeah.
steel.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, scary, isn't it? I mean, yeah, it's a government that's, yeah, I don't think in my lifetime has really ever had an industrial policy. And
No,
it's the invisible hand. Yeah, we'll let the invisible hand decide. And yeah, unfortunately, yeah, self-organizing doesn't quite work like that.
no,
well,
just
they're
not being able to make
actually,
steel, or
yeah,
even a proper company, a proper country
Yeah,
anymore.
country.
it's bizarre. Yeah, bizarre, isn't it?
We are the first. They're the first government that's actually branded incompetence.
Oh, that's dark. But
Well, honestly, I can't think of a single thing that they haven't cocked up really badly. Uh, but that's a subject for another day.
yeah.
Yes, we're right. Costas, I'm conscious you're an hour ahead of us, so we're eating into your evening.
Oh no, don't worry, don't worry.
But,
This has been such a pleasure. So thank you for having
yeah,
me on. It's been I
yeah,
really
yeah. It'd be great
like
to
this.
have you back again. I think perhaps what we should do, Mike, is I like that. I like the hard truths bit. But when Shana and I and you have got a first iteration of this, what the messaging sounds like, we should take it to Costas, who's a real expert on this stuff, and have him grill us.
What, live on air?
Well, I don't know. We'll see how brave we are. I think perhaps we should share the thinking with Costas beforehand.
Well, if he's
And
into it, well,
have a
definitely, yeah,
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 I'm a
yeah.
very friendly griller. I don't burn.
Oh, right. So, final question: what shall I call this episode? Because what was it about?
It was about
Um,
innovation in very different domains. It was about
Was it a lot? A lot of it was about investing.
yeah, yeah.
how about investing in ecosystems? Because that seemed to be another enormous theme of different pockets of businesses that can't talk to each other.
Well, as another subject, because we didn't cover it really in
I
any
think it was for
depth.
me. It was an underlying theme that
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
okay.
all the paradoxes that we
Oh,
came to were it's well, these people don't talk to these people.
because the thing I wanted to say there, because I'm reading The Tower and the Square. Have you read that,
No,
Costas?
no.
Read that. It's very great. Because Daryl doesn't like Noah Yuval Harari,
Oh
who's the
God.
greatest person ever. He likes this slightly right-wing academic historian.
Slightly right. What you mean? Somebody who understands complexity? That's now right wing, is it?
No, I won't go there. I won't go there. He's definitely right-wing. But he's made me see everything in terms of networks.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get somebody, because I listened to a book and it was by a network expert, and it was just crap. It was like, but he's a historian and he's got into that's what he does. He crosses silos and he goes flat out and he learns about them and he communicates them in a context which is with examples, which is so much more interesting than the kind of dry academic with no examples stuff. And a lot of what he does is or people do is draw network maps and say Henry Kissinger, he was so important because he was connected not only to lots of people in the government, but people all over the world at different levels, hierarchies, etc., etc. He was a total networker, and that's what I was thinking. How do you solve this eco investing and communicating to a network? Well, isn't the first thing you do is draw a network diagram the best you can, and then you identify the nodes that don't necessarily have the job titles, but might have more influence. And how do you do that?
Yeah, it's maybe
That seems
something we
really
can
cool.
start doing now. What has surprised me, this was not a topic to bring in the podcast, but is the amount of invisible money going around. I mean, I came out of Happen and closing the door of Accenture behind me, thinking I had worked with the greatest companies, the most influential companies on the planet. And within a year, I'd realized these businesses are just, they're owned by the real rich
They're
people.
pawns.
They're pawns. So when Alan Jope from Unilever is fired, he's not fired by whatever he's doing. It's just
The
because
shareholder.
some Indian guy you and I will have never heard of who owns $12 billion worth of Unilever stake just calls him and says, you know what? I'm fed up with you. Time to find a replacement. That, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then I had no, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, who are the three rich families in the Netherlands with family offices capable of investing more than, say, 500 million, I would have said, well, Heineken, Brenningmeier, and then it would have been a long silence, and then I would come up with a third. And now there's like at least 100 just in the Netherlands. There's mega money out there, and the problem is that's kind of the space that you need to go into to start pulling real cash into something like a fund. And this is a very closed network of individuals. So the mapping the network, here's the challenge. This is the paradox. It's how do you map a network of which you have no idea how big it is? Am I just seeing 5% of the network? Am I seeing 50% of the network? Am I seeing zero? I still don't know. I mean, we have one guy, not my fellow founder Luca, but another Luca. We have two Lucas on the team. The only thing he's done in the past 18 months is just been on the phone with potential
Right. Yeah.
sellers,
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
find. And
Well,
I mean, he could call 10 a day, and there's always a new one. And it's just, and some
It's-
of these go back to like Florence banking times, the de Medicis in the 15th
Yeah.
century.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
Wow.
goodness me.
Yeah, it's like an 800 family office sitting on $100 billion.
But
And
are you consciously doing? Are you writing this down or recording it in a map?
well, it's not a map, but it's a very long sort of list of let's say it's literally an Excel sheet right now of all the players that we've been in touch with, that we want to get in touch with. But every time you sort of speak
Right.
to one and you peel back a layer, you realize, shit, there's like 10 more behind that. It's and it's just such a parallel universe. I literally had zero idea existed. Um, and these, and
Well,
and the only place they touch sort of the real world is through these I find very dubious platforms like COP or WEF or that sort of the
yeah.
when they sort of pop their heads into reality and then pull themselves out again very quickly.
So what are those?
So the
Well,
COP, yeah. So the I don't know if
Oh,
you
COP. Oh, right.
yeah
Yeah. 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 These big
COP
meetings,
29
like
we now have
yeah.
coming
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Oh gosh.
yeah, and it's just way bigger than I had ever assumed. And you
Well,
have to interact with it
if
to
you
some degree.
could,
Yeah.
if you guys, clever guys, can work out a way of working out those networks, that would be massively powerful.
I think you'll probably. It feels like the sort of thing that would get you assassinated.
Well,
That's
no jokes. That is it is it's a pretty scary place. These are people with multiple
Really.
passports. This is people who this is so here's just to give you a sense. So the one of the investors in our fund is we're not on recording anymore, right?
No. Well, we are,
Um,
but I'll delete it all.
yeah, but it's
Oh,
so
actually, I need to stop it. I need to stop it.
probably, yeah. Stop recording.
yeah.
I forgot that. Yeah. Stop.